a sleek, chrome-handled door, a perfect ceramic white manicure, a flash of a smug smile. The car's engine hums, a low, arrogant purr. In the reflection of the tinted window, a frantic face watches, paralyzed. A hand reaches for the brake, but it's too late. The low rumble becomes a roar. The tire treads a useless blur on the wet concrete. The air fills with the shriek of a woman's terror, followed by a sound that is both a splash and a metal-on-water thud. Silence. Then, the glint of a luxury SUV's grille submerged, as the pristine blue water of a swimming pool slowly turns to a murky, gasoline-stained green. The day started like most days, with the low-frequency hum of a brewing conflict. It was less a war and more a cold, persistent state of tension, one that had settled over the quiet suburban cul-de-sac like a blanket of smog. The source of this atmospheric pressure was, as always, Karen. Her latest obsession was her new car, a European-made luxury SUV that she had, in a rare moment of transparent vulnerability, admitted cost more than Alex's entire house. The vehicle itself was a testament to her philosophy. Bigger was better, safer was non-negotiable, and everything she owned was an extension of her own perceived superiority. She would park it just a little too far into the shared space, its polished black surface a constant gleaming challenge. She'd casually mention its advanced safety features, cross-traffic alerts, blind spot monitoring, an AI that anticipates my needs, in a tone that suggested Alex's more modest sedan was a glorified coffin. Alex's car, a four-door sedan he'd lovingly restored himself, was his own quiet protest. It wasn't a status symbol. It was a testament to utility, reliability, and the satisfaction of a job well done. He knew every bolt, every wire, and every minor quirk. It was his. And Karen's relentless comparisons had, over the past few weeks, gone from mildly irritating to genuinely infuriating. "Honestly, Alex," she had said just yesterday, leaning against the fender of her gleaming monolith, her voice dripping with pity, "I don't know how you drive that thing. It just doesn't feel safe. What if you're in a fender bender? What's going to happen to you?" "It's got airbags, Karen," Alex had replied, trying to keep his tone level. "It passed all the safety tests with flying colors. It's perfectly safe." "Safe, darling," she'd scoffed, her laugh a brittle, unconvincing sound, "is a relative term. Safe is knowing that my car's crumple zones are designed by a team of German engineers who only drink artisanal coffee and listen to classical music. Safe is a chassis that's 50% high-strength steel. Safe is knowing my car will take the hit so I don't have to." Today, the argument had reached its fever pitch. The Neighborhood Association's annual barbecue was in full swing, and Karen, fueled by a few too many glasses of rosé, had cornered Alex by his grill. A small crowd of neighbors, sensing the impending drama, had begun to gravitate toward them. "You see, Alex," she slurred slightly, gesturing with a plastic cup toward her SUV, which she had parked on a slight incline leading down to Alex's backyard, a space that was notoriously tight and bordered by his expansive, meticulously maintained pool. "My car isn't just a machine. It's a fortress. It thinks for itself. I could literally put it in gear, walk away, and it would correct itself before it hit anything. It's that good." A few neighbors exchanged skeptical glances. "It's not a self-driving car, Karen," one of them, a man named Tom, muttered under his breath. "Oh, but it is," Karen insisted, her voice rising in a theatrical crescendo. "It has the kind of intelligent cruise control that—" She trailed off, a new, terrible idea forming in her wine-addled brain. Her eyes, glassy but filled with a sudden competitive fire, fixed on Alex's sedan, which was parked safely on the other side of the driveway. "Your car can't do that, can it? I bet if you just put it in drive and let it roll, it would hit something. Your flower beds, maybe. Or—" Her gaze swept to the gleaming blue rectangle of the pool, a mischievous, dangerous glint in her eyes. "Or your pool." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. This was classic Karen, a performative display of her wealth and perceived intellect. Alex, however, wasn't laughing. He knew that beneath the bravado was a genuine, desperate need to win. "Karen, don't be ridiculous," he said, stepping toward her. "Let's just drop it." We're having a party." "No, no, Alex," she insisted, taking a dramatic step toward her car. "This is an important lesson. A visual aid, if you will. You see, with my car, there's no risk. It's smarter than a human driver. It won't let anything happen. It's designed to protect." She fumbled for her keys, the motion clumsy and uncoordinated. Alex felt a cold dread creep up his spine. "Karen, stop. Seriously, the ground is wet from the sprinklers. The slope." She ignored him, her attention fixed on the door handle. "See? One hand. So easy. This is safety, Alex. This is peace of mind." She unlocked the car with a triumphant click, opened the driver's side door, and slid inside. The engine, already warm, came to life with a quiet rumble. The neighbors, no longer chuckling, were now watching in horrified fascination. "Okay, I'm just going to show you its low-speed correction," she announced, her voice slightly muffled from inside the car. "See how it doesn't need me to steer? The sensors do everything." She put the car in drive, her foot hovering over the accelerator but never touching it. The car, on its own, began to inch forward, its advanced systems presumably keeping it on a straight path. Alex's heart hammered against his ribs. He had to stop her. "Karen, get out of the car!" He yelled, lunging forward. He was too late. She was too quick. With a dramatic flourish, she unbuckled her seatbelt. "Look, no hands!" she declared, her arms held up in the air in victory, her foot still not on the brake, and that's when it happened. A brief, terrible lurch, a mechanical stutter followed by a sudden, sickening surge. The car, instead of stopping or correcting, began to accelerate, slowly but with an inexorable, terrifying momentum. The low hum became a high-pitched whine. Karen's eyes widened in dawning horror, the triumphant smile replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. She fumbled for the brake pedal, but her foot, unsteady from the rosé, missed it entirely. The car's AI, or whatever she had believed it to be, was powerless against this simple human error. The front tire hit the lip of the pool deck with a gentle bump. The car paused for a fraction of a second, an eternity of silent dread, its nose tilted slightly downward. Then, with a slow, agonizing groan of protesting metal, it tilted further. The front half of the SUV pitched over the edge, the weight of the engine block pulling the rest of the chassis with it. Karen screamed, a sound of absolute terror, a sound that cut through the silence of the stunned crowd. The car, her fortress, her symbol of ultimate safety and status, slid with a grinding shriek of torn metal and a final wet gasp into Alex's pristine, shimmering pool. The water erupted in a geyser of blue, a massive wave cascading over the pool deck and dousing the bewildered onlookers. The car, now half submerged, sat like a beached whale, its tail end pointing to the sky, its headlights still on, casting an eerie, underwater glow. The air, which had seconds ago been filled with the scent of grilling burgers, was now heavy with the acrid smell of leaked gasoline and oil. The only sound was the faint gurgle of the water as it filled the engine block, and the absolute, profound silence of the crowd. Karen, soaked and sputtering, climbed out of the passenger side window, her face pale with shock. She looked from her ruined car to Alex, her eyes wide with a question that hung in the air, unspoken but clear. What just happened? Alex, however, had no answer. He just stood there, staring, a single terrible thought ringing in his mind. This was never about safety. The silence that followed the car's descent was not the peaceful quiet of a summer day. It was the heavy, crushing silence of an audience in a theater after a shocking climax. The neighbors, a moment ago a small, gossiping crowd, were now frozen statues, their plastic cups held limply in their hands. The air, thick with the smell of sizzling meat and chlorine, had been replaced by the metallic stench of leaking fluids and the faint, unsettling aroma of a gasoline rainbow spreading across the surface of the water. Karen emerged from the passenger window, a modern-day Jonah coughed up by a metallic leviathan. Her designer dress, once a vibrant statement, clung to her body like a waterlogged rag. Her meticulously applied makeup was a streaked mess, and her smug, victorious expression had been scrubbed clean by the shock of the cold water. She sputtered, coughed, and finally found her footing on the submerged roof of the car, her gaze flicking between the dripping chaos of her ruined vehicle and the stunned, silent faces of her neighbors. Alex, still standing at the edge of the pool, felt his initial shock melt away, replaced by a scalding wave of anger. He looked at the oily film on the water, at the shattered tiles, at the faint sizzling sound of water touching exposed wiring somewhere inside the car. This was no longer a joke. This was damage. This was danger. He took a step toward her, his voice low and tight with a fury he rarely allowed himself to show. "What have you done, Karen?" he demanded. Her eyes, wild and darting, finally settled on him, and the blank look of shock was instantly replaced by a frantic, defensive panic. "It's the car! It's defective!" she shrieked, her voice raspy. "I swear I didn't touch the accelerator. The system, the intelligent cruise control, it malfunctioned. It's not my fault. This is a class action lawsuit waiting to happen." A few of the neighbors exchanged looks, their expressions a mix of disbelief and pity. No one was buying it. The triumphant look on her face just moments before, the raised hands, the cocky, "no hands" declaration, it was all too fresh in their minds. Suddenly, the wail of a distant siren cut through the tension. Someone, likely Tom, had called for help. Minutes later, a fire truck and a police cruiser turned onto the cul-de-sac. The sight of the half-submerged luxury car and the oil slick on the water instantly turned the scene from a backyard barbecue gone wrong into a full-blown hazmat situation. The firemen, in their heavy protective gear, moved with a grim efficiency, while a pair of police officers began to direct the now dispersing crowd. An officer, a woman with a no-nonsense expression and a clipboard, approached Alex and Karen. Her eyes swept over the scene, a slow, professional assessment. "Sir, ma'am, what is the situation here?" Karen, still dripping, stumbled off the car and onto the deck, her composure returning with the arrival of authority. "Officer, I'm so glad you're here. This is a clear case of corporate negligence. My new vehicle, a top-of-the-line European model, has a terrible defect in its safety system. I was simply demonstrating a feature to my neighbors, and the car, it just took off on its own." She gestured toward Alex. "He's a witness. He saw everything." Alex felt the cold knot in his stomach tighten. She was not only denying her culpability, she was trying to drag him into her lie. He looked at the officer, then at the spreading oil slick in his pool, and felt a quiet resolve set in. He would not be a part of this. "Officer," he said, his voice calm despite the tremor in his hands. "She's not being truthful. She was demonstrating her car's safety features by putting it in gear and taking her hands off the wheel. She was bragging that it was so smart it wouldn't hit anything." He paused, a bitter irony in his tone. She unbuckled her seatbelt and put her hands in the air. "That's when it went into the pool." The officer's pen hovered over her clipboard. "So, you're saying she did this intentionally?" "She did it to prove a point," Alex said, his gaze fixed on Karen, who was now staring at him in a silent, furious betrayal. "To prove her car was superior to mine. She was intoxicated. She was reckless," Karen gasped, a theatrical, wounded sound. "Intoxicated? I had a single glass of wine!" "Alex, how could you? I was trying to show you how safe it was." The officer, however, ignored Karen's protests. She walked over to the submerged car, her boots crunching on the cracked deck tiles. She shined her flashlight into the open door. "Ma'am," she said, her voice flat, "are your keys still in the ignition?" Karen's face, already pale, went ashen. I don't know," she stammered. "I must have dropped them." "And the vehicle is in drive?" the officer asked, her tone now colder. I think so," Karen whispered, her gaze falling to the ground. "But it's the car's fault. It has this emergency brake system, and it should have activated. I'm going to sue them. I'm going to sue everyone." Just then, a sleek, unmarked black sedan pulled up, and a man in a crisp suit got out. He was a corporate troubleshooter, a ghost in human form. He moved with a practiced calm, a stark contrast to the chaos around him. He walked straight to the officer and introduced himself as a representative from the car's manufacturer, his voice a low, reassuring rumble. He had received an automated alert from the vehicle's telemetry system. He politely asked for permission to connect to the car's onboard diagnostic port, which the officer granted. He produced a small silver device, connected a cable, and plugged it into the car. The crowd, which had started to thin out, began to gather again, sensing a new development. Karen watched him, her eyes wide with hope. This was her vindication. The data would prove the car was defective. He was here to back up her claims. The man's fingers moved quickly over a small screen, pulling data logs. The police officer and a fireman leaned in, watching over his shoulder. He looked up from the device, his face impassive. "Officer, the vehicle's diagnostic logs are clear. The intelligent cruise control was not active at the time of the incident." He scrolled through the data, a flicker of something in his eyes, a kind of weary disappointment. Furthermore, the logs show the driver's foot was on the accelerator pedal, not the brake, for a full 3 seconds before the vehicle's forward motion was initiated. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Karen's breath hitched in her throat, her face draining of all color. The corporate troubleshooter continued, his voice as steady as a rock. The vehicle's forward momentum was initiated manually. There was no malfunction. The vehicle performed exactly as it was instructed to by the driver. The officer turned to Karen, her clipboard now a weapon. "Ma'am, you told me the car just took off. The data says you were accelerating." Karen, her perfectly manicured hands now clenched into fists, shook her head in a slow, defeated motion. She stared at the man in the suit, at the police officer, and finally, at Alex, her eyes wide, defeated, and full of a terrible, quiet rage. The fortress was not her sanctuary. It was a confessional, a silent witness to her lies, her hubris, and her shame. Her desperate need to be superior had not only ruined her own car and Alex's pool, but had now laid bare her dishonesty for everyone to see. Her safe car had just done exactly what she told it to do. A low rumble filled the air, the sound of a large tow truck backing into the driveway. The tow truck, a hulking beast of a machine, groaned its way down the narrow cul-de-sac, its air brakes hissing like a disgruntled serpent. Its arrival marked the end of the spectacle and the beginning of the reckoning. A man with a weathered face and a clipboard got out, took one look at the half-submerged luxury SUV, and let out a low whistle. "Well, that's a new one," he muttered. The next hour was a symphony of destructive efficiency. A crane was deployed, its heavy steel hooks clanking as they were carefully maneuvered around the car. The process was agonizingly slow and brutally loud. The pool, once a serene sanctuary of shimmering blue, became a violent tempest. As the cables tightened, the car's chassis groaned, and with a terrible grinding sound of ceramic tearing away from concrete, the front end of the SUV was ripped from the pool deck. A fresh cascade of water, now a thick, oily brown, surged over the shattered tiles, carrying with it shards of porcelain, fragments of trim, and floating chunks of debris. Alex stood by his patio door, watching the methodical destruction of his backyard oasis. The oil slick had spread, and despite the fire department's best efforts to contain it, a greasy sheen now coated the entire surface of the water, catching the afternoon sun in a sickening prismatic glare. He had envisioned his pool as a place of relaxation, of barbecues and summer parties with friends. Now it was a crime scene, a toxic disaster zone, a stark monument to Karen's ego. Meanwhile, Karen's frantic energy had settled into a simmering, vengeful rage. The initial shock had worn off, and her mind, a whirring engine of self-preservation, had found a new target for her fury: Alex. The corporate troubleshooter's cold, data-driven testimony had proven the car was not to blame, but in Karen's twisted logic, the fault had to lie with him. He had refused to back up her lie. He had betrayed her. She stomped over to him, her wet dress leaving a trail of dark splotches on the deck. "You did this!" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. Alex turned to face her, his hands balled into fists at his sides. "I did what, Karen? I told the truth." "You set me up! You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone," she accused, her eyes burning. "You knew the ground was slick, you knew the incline was tricky. This was all a part of your plan to get back at me for telling everyone your car is a death trap." A police officer, sensing the escalating conflict, moved between them. "Ma'am, step back. This is an active scene." Karen ignored her, her focus laser-sharp on Alex. "It's a death trap, isn't it? That's what you wanted everyone to think. You saw your chance and you took it. You're a sick man." Alex scoffed, a bitter, humorless sound. I didn't do anything, Karen. You're the one who got in a car, unbuckled your seatbelt, and put your hands in the air. The only person you have to blame is yourself. That's not what happened, she screamed, her voice cracking. The sound was so raw, so full of desperate, unhinged fury, that it silenced the nearby neighbors. You moved! You startled me! The car lurched because you— Ma'am, that's enough, the officer said, her hand resting on the holster of her sidearm. You are under the influence of alcohol and you are making false accusations. You need to calm down or I will have to place you in custody. Karen's eyes widened, a new kind of fear replacing the rage. The word custody had a sobering effect. The illusion of her insulated, perfect life was shattered. The tow truck operator, with a final heave, lifted the car entirely out of the pool. It dangled in the air, a broken, dripping carcass, before being lowered onto the flatbed with a loud, final crash. The corporate troubleshooter, his face still impassive, walked over to Karen. Ma'am, a few moments ago, you mentioned your intention to sue the company. I would advise you against that course of action. Karen, still trembling, looked at him with what little dignity she had left. Why? The car is clearly defective. I have a case. The troubleshooter didn't even bother with a gentle tone. His voice was a flat, cold line of facts. The car's telemetry data has been logged and sent to our legal department. The logs show not only the driver's intentional actions, but also that this vehicle was reported stolen 3 days ago. Furthermore, the vehicle's lease was terminated due to repeated non-payment. The dealership and financing company have been looking for this car for a month. The collective gasp from the neighbors was even louder this time. The officer's eyes went wide. Alex just stared, the puzzle pieces of Karen's baffling, reckless behavior finally clicking into place. This wasn't just about a one-upmanship with a car. This was about a lifestyle she could no longer afford to maintain. The bravado, the constant boasting, the endless competition, it had all been a performance. A desperate, failing attempt to conceal the truth. She wasn't an owner, she was a delinquent. She wasn't a victor, she was a fugitive. Karen swayed on her feet, the last of her fight draining out of her. The tow truck operator, finished with his work, secured the vehicle. The corporate troubleshooter turned and walked back to his unmarked car without another word. The police officer, her expression a mix of pity and grim determination, walked toward the patrol car. Ma'am, she said, her voice softer, but her tone leaving no room for argument. We're going to have to take a statement from you at the station. We'll arrange for a taxi to take you. Karen, her head bowed in silent final defeat, didn't move. She didn't speak. She just stood there, dripping, defeated, and utterly alone, a symbol of a life that had finally and spectacularly capsized under the weight of its own lies. The tow truck's engine revved, and with a final grinding sound, it pulled the ruined car from the driveway, leaving only a dark, oily stain on the pavement. Alex looked at the stain, then at his ruined pool, and finally at the shell-shocked woman who had brought all of this destruction down on herself. This was not a victory. This was a tragedy. The tow truck's rumble faded into the distance, leaving behind an unsettling quiet. The crowd of neighbors had dispersed, their pity and morbid curiosity satisfied. The police officer, after a brief, formal exchange of information and a final appraising look at the oily pool, had arranged a taxi for Karen and departed. Alex was left alone in the wreckage of what had been a peaceful Sunday. The sun, now lower in the sky, cast long, accusatory shadows across the yard. The pristine blue of his pool was a distant memory, replaced by a swirling, iridescent slick that shimmered with the poison of gasoline and motor oil. The concrete deck, once smooth and welcoming, was now a jagged landscape of shattered porcelain and deep black tire marks. A small, sad pile of grill tools and half-eaten hot dogs sat abandoned on a side table, a stark reminder of the party that had been so catastrophically interrupted. Alex walked to the edge of the pool, the soles of his shoes crunching on the debris. He had always taken pride in his home, seeing it as a refuge from the chaos of the world. Now it was an extension of that chaos, a scar left by someone else's recklessness. He felt no satisfaction. The moment of justice, when Karen's lies were exposed, had been brief, followed by a profound sense of exhaustion and dread. This was not a victory. This was an expensive, complicated, and deeply personal disaster. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was his home insurance agent who had been alerted by the fire department's report. "Alex, I'm so sorry to hear about this." The agent's voice was clipped, professional, and devoid of warmth. "I've reviewed the preliminary report. This is significant damage. We're going to need a full assessment." "Right," Alex said, his voice flat. "Just tell me what to do. I have photos, a police report." "That's all helpful," the agent continued, her tone tightening. "But we have a complication. The report indicates a third-party vehicle was the cause of the damage. We're going to have to file a claim against the owner's auto insurance first. That's standard procedure." Alex's stomach dropped. He knew this was coming, but hearing it out loud was a punch to the gut. "But her car was reported stolen, and she wasn't the owner. She was leasing it, and the lease was terminated. Her insurance. I'm not sure if it's even valid." A long, professional pause followed. "We'll do our due diligence, of course," the agent said, a new cautious note in her voice. "But if her policy is lapsed or if there's any dispute regarding the ownership, it could become..." "Difficult? Difficult?" Alex repeated, the word hanging in the air. "It means that our ability to get a full settlement for you is going to be contingent on a lot of factors. Legal is going to have to get involved. This isn't just about the pool, Alex. This is a property hazard, a possible environmental contamination from the fluids. The cleanup, the repair, the legal fees. This could be a long road." The agent's words were a cold shower, washing away any lingering thoughts of triumph. Alex hung up the phone. The silence of his backyard now punctuated by the incessant chirping of crickets and the low thrum of his own racing thoughts. He was a man left to clean up someone else's mess. A collateral victim of a lie that had finally come to rest in his backyard. The worst part was the thought of Karen, sitting in some police station, likely trying to spin another lie, while he was left with the very real, very expensive consequences. He walked to the edge of the pool again and looked at the dark, swirling oil slick. It was no longer just an eyesore. It was a symbol of his new reality. He was a man who had told the truth, and now he was going to pay the price for it. He looked up at his house, then at his lawn, and finally, with a bitter sense of irony, at his own car, which had been the innocent subject of a rivalry that had led to this. It sat there, unblemished, unharmed, a silent monument to its own unadorned, unboasted safety, and a deep, profound sadness settled over Alex. It was just a car. The aftermath of the incident was not a swift, surgical cleanup, but a slow, grinding campaign of reclamation. The police reports, the fire department's hazmat logs, the insurance filings, all became a towering pile of paperwork on Alex's kitchen table. His backyard, once a source of quiet pride, was now a work zone. The pool was drained, its empty basin a concrete canyon streaked with a ghostly sheen of oil. A specialized cleanup crew, dressed in white suits and respirators, worked for days, scrubbing and siphoning, their machines humming like a mournful dirge. The air, for weeks, smelled faintly of industrial solvent and regret. Alex's life, which had been a quiet rhythm of work and home, was now a constant barrage of phone calls. Calls from the insurance adjuster who needed more photos. Calls from the contractor who needed to know if he preferred smooth or textured porcelain for the new deck tiles. Calls from a lawyer representing the car's leasing company who wanted a detailed account of the events. He found himself retelling the story over and over again, each repetition stripping it of its original drama and leaving it feeling like a hollow, ridiculous punchline. The humor was gone. The only thing left was the burden. The neighbors, once captivated by the spectacle, now offered polite, knowing nods when they saw him, their brief, sympathetic smiles a reminder of the public humiliation he had endured by proxy. He saw Tom mowing his lawn, their eyes meeting for a moment before Tom quickly looked away, as if embarrassed to have been a witness. It was clear the incident had left a permanent stain on the cul-de-sac's social fabric, a crack in the veneer of suburban perfection. He would often find himself standing at his back door, staring out at the empty, desolate pool, and a profound weariness would settle over him. He wasn't angry anymore. He was just tired. He had told the truth, And in doing so, he had become the victim of an expensive and time-consuming war he never asked to fight. The irony was not lost on him. Karen, who had sought to destroy his reputation, had instead destroyed a part of his life, and now he was left to rebuild it, piece by agonizing piece. Several weeks later, a new storm hit, not of water and oil, but of legal papers. A thick envelope arrived, sealed with a law firm's letterhead. It was a formal complaint from the car's leasing company, naming Alex and Karen as defendants in a lawsuit to recover the full value of the vehicle and the significant damages incurred. A separate letter from Karen's lawyer landed with a thud on the pile. She was blaming him for the incident, citing her emotional distress and unfounded public humiliation caused by his defamatory statements. It was a final, desperate act of a woman who was drowning, and she was trying to pull him down with her. He sat at the kitchen table. The papers spread out before him, and for the first time since the incident, he felt a flicker of the old anger return. He was being sued for telling the truth. The absurdity of it was almost laughable. He picked up his phone, the number for his own lawyer already in his contacts. He was ready to fight. He would tell his story again, present the police report, the diagnostic logs. He would prove that he was not at fault. He would win. He would show her, and in that moment of quiet, righteous fury, his doorbell rang. He opened the door to find her standing there. She wasn't dressed in her usual designer clothes. She wore a simple, unadorned outfit, her hair pulled back into a tired ponytail. Her face, devoid of makeup, was pale and gaunt. Her eyes, once filled with a fiery, competitive glint, were now hollow and defeated. The woman who had been a whirlwind of entitled arrogance was now just a woman. A very sad, very tired woman. "Alex," she said, her voice a low, raspy whisper. She clutched a worn leather handbag in her hands, her knuckles white. Can I talk to you for a minute?" He didn't move. He just looked at her, at the woman who had brought so much chaos into his life. "What do you want, Karen? I'm sorry," she said, the words sounding foreign and brittle on her tongue. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong. About everything." A single tear, the first he had ever seen from her, traced a clean line through the dust on her cheek. "My husband, he left. The bank repossessed the house. My parents, they cut me off. The lawyers, they said I don't have a case. They're going to use the police report and the car's data against me." She swallowed hard, her eyes pleading. "They said if I can't get you to change your statement, they're going to put me in jail for falsifying a report and insurance fraud." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with consequence. This was her final desperate gambit. This was the true final moment of reckoning. He had won. He had won everything. The car, the money, the dignity. It was all his. He could have his revenge. He could tell her to get off his property. He could seal her fate with a single word. Instead, he just stared at her, not with hatred, but with a kind of weary, profound understanding. He had spent weeks in a hell of bureaucracy and cleanup. He had been wronged, and now, finally, the person who wronged him was facing the consequences. But looking at her, a broken woman on his doorstep, he felt nothing but a hollow emptiness. Winning was not what he had thought it would be. He looked past her at the quiet, tree-lined street, at the children playing on the sidewalk, at his own car, sitting peacefully in his driveway, and he finally understood. The true cost of the rivalry was not the money or the time or the damaged pool. It was the peace he had lost. And a victory over a broken, pathetic person was no victory at all. "The police report is public record, Karen," he said, his voice quiet. "And the car's data. That's undeniable. There's nothing I can change." He paused, his gaze meeting hers, not in triumph, but in a shared, silent grief. "I'm not going to lie for you." "Not again." She flinched, a fresh wave of tears welling in her eyes, and she turned and walked away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She didn't look back. Alex watched her go, a final fading figure in the late afternoon sun. He stood there for a long time, listening to the crickets and the distant sound of children playing. He knew the repairs would be finished soon. The pool would be blue again. Life would go back to normal. But he also knew that he had been changed. He had won the war, but he had lost his peace. He turned and walked back inside, leaving the ghosts of that terrible Sunday to the quiet, empty expanse of his backyard.